freedom of speech and expression everywhere in the world.
In his 1941 State of the Union address, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt warned American citizens of the Axis powers in Europe, saying that while the war they waged was beyond American shores, they were still a threat to the future and safety of the United States regardless. FDR ended his speech proclaiming that the immediate future would be focused on securing 4 essential freedoms, not just for Americans, but all humans: freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom to an adequate standard of living, and freedom from fear. After World War II ended, the United States found itself a leader on the world stage, and spearheaded by its newly created intelligence agencies, the CIA and NSA, the mid and late 1900s were an era of a different kind of warfare. In opposing the Soviet Union and stopping the spread of communism, the United States involved itself in thousands of covert operations around the globe, from Iran to Angola, Cuba to Chile. The CIA supported rebel groups, toppled governments, and even attempted assassinations. Splinter Cell is a series that speaks to that era of American history, of covert intervention and surveillance, both foreign and domestic. It's about Third Echelon, a new top-secret branch of the NSA that uses splinter cells to covertly collect and act on intelligence. But where Splinter Cell finds political weight is its reference to FDR's 4 freedoms, namely that splinter cells have a 5th, the freedom to do whatever's necessary in order to protect the other 4, even if doing so means violating them. If captured or killed, the existence of splinter cells is denied, not necessarily out of an effort to keep their motives secret, but more so because the nature of their actions is such that it probably couldn't stand ethical, moral, or legal scrutiny. Splinter Cell Pandora Tomorrow, the second series entry, was one of the very first games I completed beginning to end, and as a kid, most of the franchise's political intrigue, the moral penumbra Splinter Cells operate in, went far over my head. Instead, what really left an impression on me was the game's tone and pace. It's not at all hyperbolic to say that Splinter Cell is a work of genius. Ubisoft, carrying Tom Clancy's brand of grounded American military fiction into video games, famously spurred the series' creation by ordering Ubisoft Montreal to make a Metal Gear Solid 2 killer. Metal Gear Solid was and is a messy blend of stealth action, heavy political commentary, and surreal fiction. But Splinter Cell's first 3 games, Splinter Cell, Pandora Tomorrow, and Chaos Theory, lean a different direction. Penned with the Tom Clancy name, this trilogy is grounded and methodical. Their settings, as the saying goes, ripped from the headlines, creating a pseudo-realistic world that, at the time, filled a burgeoning stealth market and stood in contrast to Metal Gear Solid's fantastical espionage action. Sam Fisher is a protagonist who's the antithesis of the handsome, charming spy. He's a seasoned, middle-aged military veteran with a penchant for dark humor and sarcasm. Combined with excellent performances by Michael Ironside, Sam Fisher became a grizzled, instantly recognizable character and an icon of stealth. Where the phrase stealth action may bring to mind contemporary ideas of athletic, fleet-footed heroes with visibility meters floating around them, stealth action as defined by the original Splinter Cells is essentially an entirely different genre. Sam, in his original form, is slow, even sluggish, making combat difficult, punishing, and just downright inconvenient. Stealth requires watching enemy patrols, sticking to darkness, and keeping Sam's movements as quiet as possible. There are moments where the series sports a thin, sensational glaze, times when Sam is suddenly thrust into a firefight or caught off guard and forced to improvise, but for the most part, the original Splinter Cell trilogy represents excellent, slow-moving, hard-line stealth. So, in a series with as politically heavy a premise as Splinter Cell, you might expect to see some form of dialogue regarding American intervention or the ethics of covert, even illegal operations as means to an end. But the first 3 games tend to use those themes as a stage rather than develop them into any kind of discussion or argument. In a 2005 interview with Game Critics, Clint Hocking, level designer on the original Splinter Cell and creative director for Chaos Theory, was asked whether Chaos Theory's references to American imperialism constituted an intentional commentary. "Not really," Hocking replied. "I want the enemy soldiers in the game to express the things that they would likely express. I'm not here to make statements about whether their beliefs are right or wrong. More importantly than the opinions of enemy soldiers is what Sam's attitude is in the game. Sam definitely has some reservations about the policy he has been tasked with enforcing. He definitely has some opinions about so-called American imperialism. What it is an attempt to illustrate a character in conflict with his own role in a complex situation." While Hocking was specifically talking about chaos theory, the quote rings true for the entirety of the original trilogy. There's a friction between Sam the operative and Sam the person, and it's unpacked in a few ways. How Sam, via the player, interacts with the world, and through his relationships with other characters, mainly Lambert and Grimsdottir, his third echelon teammates, and his daughter Sarah. If you read some in-game texts or even watched a few making-of documentaries, you'll notice there's a bit of a tendency to paint Sam as amoral and uncaring. I don't think this is necessarily true. Sam is relentless, harsh, and definitely unafraid of using force to complete his objectives, even if it's applied to innocent people. But to go so far as to say amoral, I think, would be inaccurate. In Pandora Tomorrow's second level, Sam's objective is to get important information from Francois Coldeboeuf, a hostage hiding from terrorists. If you let the terrorists kill Coldeboeuf, or kill him yourself, Lambert berates Sam at the end of the level.
That was a fine way to thank Coldeboeuf.
I get the feeling you're being sarcastic.
He didn't need to die.
Fine. I won't kill him next time.
I'm putting you up for psych evaluation the next time you're stateside.
If you save Coldeboeuf, which is really easy to miss, nothing is said. These two outcomes, though, give us different pictures of who Sam is. Does he care for the lives of the innocent, or not? Later in Pandora Tomorrow, Lambert orders Sam to kill Shin Bet agent Dahlia Tal, who, at the time, poses no threat. If you do so, Sam becomes angry and disgruntled.
Tell me what I just did, Lambert.
The right thing. Hard work, but it had to happen.
Shin Bet wasn't playing a straight game.
Killing unarmed women seems mighty close to terrorism.
Shut up, Fisher. Leave the ethics to us.
If you refuse, Sam remains defiant, even once he's told that Dahlia plans to kill him.
Damn it, Fisher. We needed her dead.
Why?
Shin Bet's not playing a straight game.
It's not your job to question.
I'm going to need a little more warning to shoot unarmed women.
Sam's attitudes toward killing Coldeboeuf and killing Dahlia are incongruent. With Coldeboeuf, he's cold and sarcastic. With Dahlia, he's angry. But saving both characters gives us a version of Sam that's consistent. He doesn't mind killing those who pose a threat, but he's not murderous, and he wants to kill with reason. In Dahlia's case, we're also given a highlight of Sam's sometimes contentious relationship with Lambert and Grimsdottir. The trio are friends and occasionally even partake in Sam's dark sense of humor, but the nature of Sam's job means he's often inserted into situations of unknown scale and complexity, and while the moral and legal means by which he accomplishes his missions are nebulous, his mission objectives are usually specific and well-defined.
You ready to get to work?
I'd feel better if I knew what was going on.
You know what you need to. The CIA lost a mole inside Georgian President Kombay Nikoladzi's cabinet. Her name is Alice Madison. They sent in Agent William Robert Blaustein to find her and lost him too.
Are we working with the CIA's cooperation?
Blaustein is outfitted with subdermals just like yours. That'll be your best lead to find him.
You didn't answer my question.
We'll tell you what you need to know.
Deviating from Sam's orders when you're able to, like refusing to kill Dahlia, provides some of the deepest, most interesting looks into Sam's psyche. In Chaos Theory, when war breaks out between North and South Korea, Sam's ordered to salvage data off of a crashed plane. On arrival, he finds the South Korean pilots survived. Sam's objective has nothing to do with the pilots, but you can save them.
The plane is too badly damaged to recover the data. You'll need to fall back and designate the target for an airstrike. Use the structure down the street for your platform.
Let me get the pilots to safety first.
We don't have a lot of time, Sam. An NKA recovery team is en route.
Are you ordering me to leave these guys here and call in an airstrike?
I'm telling you what the objective is, trusting you to complete it. You have your orders. Fisher, if you compromise this mission for those men...
Save it, Irving. You gave me my orders already.
Sam's cynicism, his occasional clashes with Lambert and Grimsdottir, arise from scenarios like this, of constantly being in situations he can't control but nonetheless has to fix. All the while, the brutal means by which he conducts his missions drive a wedge into his relationship with Sarah. Sarah personifies the conflict between Sam the human, who thinks and has emotions, and Sam the operative, who needs to act and can't afford to think. There's a great scene at the end of the first game that illustrates all this, where Sam and Sarah watch the president congratulate US armed forces for ending the Georgian information crisis. Knowing the truth of what it took to stop the crisis, that he operated on US soil and that the CIA rigged Georgia's presidential election, Sam can't help but laugh, while Sarah, unaware of his actions, looks on confused.
That American tenacity cannot overcome. The world knows no problem that American ingenuity cannot solve. And so
Dad,
I extend my
what's so
deepest
funny?
admiration to every U.S. citizen of the world, to every civilian and every soldier standing firm against the terror and tyrannies of wicked men. History will not forget your resolve. History will not forget your resolve.
Dad, what's going on? You haven't laughed since the Reagan administration.
It's nothing. Forget about it.
Sarah is absent from Chaos Theory. If you didn't play the first two games, you may not know she exists, and it wouldn't be until Splinter Cell's latter trilogy, Double Agent, Conviction, and Blacklist, that their relationship would come back into focus. In a 2006 interview with the Fairer Sex, Hocking said Sarah was dropped from the story because the team couldn't think of a better way to include her outside of her dying or being kidnapped, saying those scenarios were horribly cliché. What makes this reasoning surprising is that Chaos Theory's design gives its narrative wider room to express itself through gameplay. In doing so, Sam becomes a more malleable character, and to drop Sarah from the equation altogether feels as though the team threw the baby out with the bathwater. Regardless, the original first two games, when it comes to gameplay, are relatively strict and linear. Sam has a 3-alarm limit before the mission fails, and sometimes he can't be spotted at all. His use of lethal force is also kept on a short leash. Even in situations where killing doesn't pose any obvious moral ambiguity, Sam is told not to, and if he does, it's game over. Chaos Theory shakes a lot of this up. Levels are multi-pathed, have open-ended objectives with multiple ways of completing them, and Sam no longer has a 3-alarm limit. There's also more room to exercise Sam's fifth freedom, even a few instances where he's explicitly told not to kill, but can, and the mission continues. This includes US soldiers. Chaos Theory gives you a direct and indirect way to accomplish just about everything. You can shoot lights out, or hit them with a temporary EMP. This guard at a computer, you can shoot him, hide his body, and then hack the computer, or you can hack the computer from a distance without leaving a trace. Narratively, the picture of a man in conflict, of a person with a moral compass operating in a morally ambiguous realm, stays consistent, but Chaos Theory's wider array of gameplay choices allow you to bend that characterization and impose your moral judgments onto the situation. The fifth freedom makes Sam judge, jury, and executioner, and it's you that distinguishes between the three, while Chaos Theory purposefully inserts you into situations that provide motivation to act on the fifth freedom. When Sam witnesses the torture and murder of Bruce Morgenholt, grabbing one of the terrorists triggers this.
I already don't like you. Don't make it worse for yourself.
Who are you?
Shut up. Why did you torture Morgenholt?
Lacerda told us to.
Why? What does he want to know?
Math problems. Programmer stuff. I don't get it.
You're just the stupid one who likes to hurt people, huh?
Exactly.
Can you think of a reason why the world wouldn't be a better place without you?
Please. I
didn't think so.
Whether you choose to kill, subdue, or even ignore the terrorists that tortured Morgenholt doesn't change the outcome of the level or really anything about the game, and it's not supposed to. When Sam has to break into a Panamanian bank, you can kill the bank guards like they're any other enemy, even though they aren't clearly guilty of any crime. How far you push Sam's fifth freedom is a dilemma Chaos Theory wants you to grapple with. To consider whether or not Sam should or shouldn't kill, or how you feel when infringing on the privacy of civilians to accomplish a mission, is the centerpiece to Splinter Cell's narrative, at least in the original trilogy. What the first three games don't do, however, is confront these issues on any other level than that of an individual. The larger themes of US intervention and foreign policy stop with Sam's internal conflict. There isn't a deeper discussion about what the US had done, and at the time of their release was doing in countries all over the world, and this is somewhat disappointing. A common thread many of Splinter Cell's villains share is that their disdain for the US does not come from cultural hatred or just a desire for power, but also a history of dealing with US intervention. In the first game, the CIA thoroughly infiltrates Georgian President Coldeboeuf Nicoladz's cabinet, directly spying on Georgia's government. When Nicoladze invades Azerbaijan, the US and NATO quickly intervene, but whether the US intervenes purely for humanitarian reasons or to protect his interest in Azerbaijan's oil, or both, is left vague. This setting bears some structural similarities to the United States' involvement with Saddam Hussein in Iraq during the early 1990s and 2000s. And while it's tough to tell exactly when development began on Splinter Cell, this is a post-9/11 story about terror attacks that hit the US, while the NSA, specifically Third Echelon, infringes on peace and privacy in the name of the greater good. Suadi Sedano in Pandora Tomorrow attacks the US Embassy in East Timor and subsequently leads a terror campaign, not only as a reaction to a new US military base, but also as an act of revenge. When East Timor declared independence in 1975, Indonesia moved in to claim it as their own. In reality, Indonesia's invasion was both allowed and assisted by the American government under President Ford. In the game, the CIA not only supported Indonesia's actions, but assisted Sedano's Dara Dan Doa, an Indonesian terrorist group, in fighting against Timorese independence. But in the late 90s, the CIA pulled support from Sedano and sided with East Timor, leaving Norman Soth, their agent in charge of the operation, out to dry. Sedano and Soth's terror campaign against the US is a response to, from their point of view, betrayal and abandonment by the CIA. What sets Sedano and Soth apart from Nicoladze, and the first game apart from its sequel, is Pandora Tomorrow's thematic undertones of paranoia, an age-appropriate coding in a post-9/11 world.
No, the important files are off the grid. His case file says the founder was worried about the government stealing his client's files when the apocalypse rolls around.
Paranoia-based security.
That's our mantra.
Where Nicoladze surprises and evades US intelligence by killing undercover CIA agents and crippling American infrastructure with cyber attacks, Sedano and Soth smuggle smallpox boxes into the US not just as threats, but insurance. In the event Sedano's killed, the boxes open, triggering a surge of outbreaks across the US. So by this point, you may have noticed that the CIA takes a somewhat subtle antagonistic role in the first two games. And while never explicitly stated, there exists some tension between it and Third Echelon, the CIA being unable or unwilling to fully cooperate with Sam's missions. 4 levels into the first game, and Sam is breaking into CIA headquarters, looking for and eventually kidnapping a compromised CIA employee. And during the final level, Georgia is a country in peril. After Nicoladze's fall, the CIA rigs Georgia's elections and makes Valram Kristavi president, but Kristavi turns on the agency, attempting to kill Sam and take control of a nuclear bomb Nicoladze snuck into the US. Carrying over into Pandora Tomorrow, Grimsdottir tells Sam that the CIA's support for Indonesia and Sedano's terror group will be buried for at least the next 2 decades. The CIA wants to let the agency employees still working there to get good and retired before anything they did in Indonesia comes to light. The CIA's support ran from about 1986 to 1998 and was probably pushing the sharp end of Indonesia's campaign of pacification against East Timor. Returning to Hocking's quote, "My disappointment does not stem from these games refusing to condemn US foreign policy, but failing to seriously confront it while simultaneously using it as inspiration for its stories and villains." While the first 2 games give us a main villain straight from the beginning, Chaos Theory shadows its villains in mystery, and it's not until late in the game that you learn Douglas Shetland, Sam's friend and former colleague, and Japanese Admiral Toshiro Otomo conspired to start World War III. Shetland's goal being to end American intervention across the world.
It doesn't have to end like this, Sam.
No, but it does have to end.
On that we agree. We've been fighting their dirty little wars our entire lives, and where do we end up? Staring at each other down the barrels of our guns. Nothing has changed, Fisher. And it won't change by degrees. We have to tear it down and start over. It's the only way.
Your own little chaos theory, throw the world into war and hope that what comes out the other side is better.
It will be better. Because this war will change things, Sam.
In a sense, Sam's missions are not proactive, but reactive. He's a cleanup man, cutting through international law and bureaucratic red tape in the name of the greater good. Both the first and second games are about the CIA influencing turmoil in other nations that eventually threatens the US. Shetland's speech, by comparison, touches on issues that are broader than just the CIA, but the pattern remains the same. Villains in Splinter Cell are not fighting only out of a warped sense of right and wrong, but in retaliation for something the US has done. For his part, Sam contains these threats, blowback that rises from US intervention in unpredictable and chaotic ways. The most important question this blowback asks, though, is why does it exist in the first place? Even with Sam's personal conflict, Splinter Cell dances around that question. This hesitation makes Chaos Theory's ending, which could have been the most poignant ending of the original trilogy, ring somewhat hollow. Shetland, like Sam, is disillusioned, and he appeals to Sam's internal conflict as far back as Pandora tomorrow.
It's good to see you again, Shetland. Once we're back home, we'll get that beer.
Glad to hear it. We need to have a talk about some work I might have for you.
I've already got an employer, and they hear everything we say.
Good. They should know a man with your skills deserves more money and autonomy. A man should fight any war but his own, especially in the America we've got today.
This continues through Chaos Theory, and during their final confrontation, when Shetland lowers his weapon, you're given two choices. You can either shoot Shetland or have Sam holster his gun, in which case Shetland tries to attack, but Sam fights him off. Both choices result in the same cutscene, but your actions could very well lead you to perceive that cutscene differently.
You're right, Doug. I wouldn't shoot an old friend.
Either way, it's a really emotional moment for Sam. He kills the only character that empathized with his struggle, a struggle that is integral to who Sam is as a person and character. But rather than allowing Sam to reflect on that moment, allowing us to consider the merits of Shetland's speech and their relation to Splinter Cell's overall narrative, Sam is whisked away on his next mission. The game ends with a chummy third echelon celebrating their victory, as though Sam wasn't just forced to kill a longtime friend. The bitter and unavoidable irony of FDR's Four Freedoms is that he's also the president that enabled the forced relocation of Japanese Americans into concentration camps, doing so only about a year after his speech. It was a decision that stripped Japanese and other Americans of their constitutional rights and was upheld infamously in Korematsu v. United States, among the worst Supreme Court rulings in American history. Splinter Cell, Pandora Tomorrow, and Chaos Theory are about the limits society applies to freedom, justice, and peace, of how we come to the decision to draw a line and then cross it. Like Sam, we may find ourselves frustrated, sometimes by limitations and other times by being forced into conflict when none was needed, all the while at the mercy of a complicated system of policy and politics that we have no power but to mitigate the damage of, and hope that what we contribute to the world will ultimately make it safer and better for the future.